Now, this took place sometime in the U.S., which I believe it was somewhere in Kentucky, when one of my friends was visiting there in the summertime of 2017. We'll call my friend by the name of Aiden. Now, Aiden was traveling with his family in the summertime, and they like to go to places. However, while they were visiting Kentucky, they were visiting Aiden's grandparents from his dad's side. So, at the time of this story, it was pretty hectic. With everything going smoothly on the vacation, it seemed to be all is ending well until much later on in this story. Now, Aiden was alone because he wasn't feeling good sometime in the summer around that time. He had a bad headache, so he asked his parents if he could stay alone at the grandparents' house, to which they had no issue with. While he was alone and he was just doing his own thing, trying to rest, he was watching a bit of TV until he heard a sound as if someone was entering the house. Confused, Aiden got up and looked, but he thought it would have been his dad or his mom or maybe the grandparents returning. But when he got to the front hallway, he saw that the front door was closed and there was no cars in the driveway, to which it was weird. But then he ended up realizing that sound was actually coming from the back, which means from the back of the house. He ended up going over there and he ended up closing the door, but as soon as he did, he saw there was a man dressed up as if he was doing a robbery. In fact, the scene even looked like a robbery. Aiden had no idea what to do, so he was standing as frozen as he could. He had no idea what to do. He was scared, confused, and wondering how this guy managed to get in the house. He stood there for what seemed to be like a few moments, until all of a sudden the guy ended up walking over to him. He ended up telling him, to not tell anybody what he saw, or he wouldn't hesitate to kill him. Obviously, this scared Aiden, and this guy just walks away. Nothing really was stolen, but the only thing was stolen was his grandparents' jewelry. He ended up telling his parents about it shortly after he left, and they suggested he call the police, to which he did. However, though, they took this guy's his statement, but they couldn't find the man who appeared to be robbing the house. Still to this day, Aiden is confused as to why this guy wanted to rob his house, and why didn't he not hesitate to kill Aiden the moment he saw him. Honestly, it confuses Aiden to this day, and he wonders if this guy was even caught or not. He'd like to think that he was pretty much caught and put in the jail, but he kind of somewhat has his doubts about it, seeing that he hasn't heard about the police about the case being updated since. He kind of hopes that this guy never returned. So, a friend of mine, which we'll call her by her name Stephanie, was about sometime in 2016. She was 25 at the time of the story, and this honestly really shook her pretty much a lot. Most of the time she was home alone because both her parents worked night shifts, so she was most likely home alone most of the time. Sometimes her older brother, who would come and visit from college, was there, or, he happened to stop by to pick up something. He'd stop by once in a while. But most of the time, it was just Stephanie and her dog, which his name was Andy. Andy was a pretty nice Doberman Pinscher, and Andy was a very sweet dog. He was basically a dog that you could cuddle up with, and you wouldn't have any problems with him whatsoever. He was a very good, well-behaved dog and had no issues whatsoever. However, though, something really scary happened to Stephanie sometime around the summer of 2016. Now, to cut to the chase, Stephanie was alone and she got home from work and she was obviously exhausted. She was going upstairs to bed when she decided to order some pizza. She ordered pizza and was watching a movie while on her laptop when suddenly she ended up hearing tapping noise. It sounded like someone was knocking on the windows. She looked around, but she couldn't see anybody outside of her windows, and even checked the windows outside, but there was no one there. It was obvious that something really freaky was going on, and she had no idea what was happening. She ended up thought that maybe her brother was home and was probably just trying to prank her. But that wasn't the case. She ended up grabbing her dad's gun, which he kept it in the bedroom, and she ended up going downstairs to look outside. There was a man who attempted to try to get in the house through the back door, pounding and banging on the door, what seemed to be like he had a large knife. He ended up screaming as he was begging to try to be let in, but Stephanie had a gun and said, "Get off my property, I have a gun." As soon as she screamed that, she ended up calling the police as the man refused to leave. The man was eventually caught when the police arrived, and it was revealed to Stephanie that since he was mentally unstable, he had been trying to break into other people's houses when they're home alone or when there's no one home at all. He had stabbed and assaulted a man who was around Stephanie's age and had attempted murder multiple times in the neighborhood. He was arrested, but he was sent back to a mental institution. Stephanie was never left home alone very much after that, but whenever she was left home alone, she got security cameras and stuff like that. She's now got 2 kids now, and she would never have any of her children experience anything like she did years ago. Okay, so this took place sometime, I guess maybe be about a few years ago. I think it was around 2018 or something, or maybe 2016. I can't remember exactly. This was around the time when my brother was in the hospital and my mom was out with him to spend time with him while my dad was at work. I came home from school on a Friday night, and it was around March, and it was sometime before the March break started. I basically had a rough day at school, not being able to see my brother, and I was quite lonely. I was playing video games on my Xbox One, and it was somehow around 6 p.m. Before my dad called me and asked me about what I wanted from Wendy's, I ended up hearing what seemed to be like footsteps coming from down in the basement. At first I thought that maybe might have been one of the cats down there, so I ended up looking down to see if any of the cats were down there. There were no cats down there besides one of them. There was only one down in the basement, and I checked everywhere, but I couldn't seem to find anyone in the basement. But by the time I went back upstairs, I heard the same sound. Sound like someone was tapping. This time it came from outside of my house. I looked in the backyard, but I saw no one was there. This was honestly getting pretty creepy because I was alone in the house with cats. I didn't see anyone outside or anything, so this was weird. It wasn't until I ended up hearing what seemed to be like more tapping sound, but this time it came from upstairs. I went upstairs, but there was no one there. So I was contemplating on trying to ask my mom or dad if I should get the cops or not. I was contemplating on that while trying to ponder my thoughts as to what I should do next. I heard what seemed like someone coming from outside banging on my door. I knew obviously that there was no one at my door, so when I looked, there was nobody outside. So this was honestly getting really creepy because I didn't even know who was out there. I even stepped outside my front door just to make sure that there was no ding-dong ditchers, as yes, that doesn't happen really often, but it very rarely does happen at times. But I didn't see anyone outside. So knowing that there was no one out there, I ended up going back to my game. Just a, just after I got off the phone with my dad about what I want from Wendy's, I heard the tapping again. This time it came from outside my garage door, and that's when I went to my garage. There was no one there. I even called out if anyone was out there to come out and show themselves, but there was no one there. I texted my friend, and she said that it was most likely maybe the wind blowing. It was a bit windy, so that might have been why. It was a little windy after all, so it must have been a windy day. Well, evening. I ended up didn't hear anything that night until sometime maybe about a few hours later. I was already about to heading to bed when I heard the tapping again. This time it came from right outside my bedroom window. I obviously looked, but I couldn't find anyone there, and this honestly really freaked me out because I have no idea who or what was outside making these tapping noises, but it sure didn't sound friendly. I even couldn't see if anyone was outside, and I even called out if anyone was there, but there was no response. I didn't tell my mom or my dad about this because they would think I'm crazy or hallucinating. I never heard any of that sound since then, and I believe what I experienced that day was completely paranormal. So, for a bit of context, this happened back maybe a few years ago. It was sometime around 2018, and my friend at the time was about maybe 17 years old. His name, we will say, his name was Gabriel. Gabriel was 17 and was about to turn 18 in a couple of days. This was sometime around July, and he was left home alone. Most of the time when he was left home alone, he never had any strange, weird encounters or anything like that. To be brutally fair and honest, though, he sometimes gets really lonely, which he doesn't admit that it's true, but in reality he does. He didn't mind being left alone, but eventually got boring since he didn't have anyone to play with besides people online if he were to do online gaming. Now, his mom and dad ended up getting a divorce for reasons I will not go into. But Gabriel obviously ended up having one weekends when he was living with his dad. He was alone when his dad went to work, and he basically was just watching TV and then playing video games and etc. However, he ended up deciding to go down to the basement to get something, as his dad asked him to go fetch him a really old shirt. Of course, he had no idea why his dad needed an old shirt, but Gabriel obliged and went down to the basement. When he got to the basement and found the shirt, he ended up looking at the far corner of the basement that looked like there was a shadow. The shadow even looked like that there was a man, but he couldn't really tell if it was the actual person or not. He ended up looking at this, whatever this creature is, or whatever the shadow of it is, and he just seemed to not really move at all. Except he couldn't really tell if it was a real person, since the actual features were pretty much covered by the darkness, so he couldn't really tell. At that point, Gabriel honestly was confused, so he thought that maybe there really was a cutout person. He kind of remembered his dad had a cutout person of a baseball player here some time ago, and wondered that he still kept it after all these years. That is when Gabriel called his dad and talked to him about it, but his dad said that he would talk to him about it when he got home. However, just to be safe, Gabriel locked the basement just to be on the safe side, in case if there really was someone down there, then if it was a true real person, that they would call the cops. However, though, it wasn't until his dad came back, and when his dad came back from work, he got the shirt, and that's when Gabriel just said that there was this outline of a cutout person or something that it resembles a person, and he asked his dad if he still had that cutout of that baseball player that he liked. Obviously, his dad gave him a confused look and said, "Oh, I threw that cutout out about a year ago." Honestly, that was really creepy, but his dad checked out the basement, but nothing became of it. Still to this day, though, Gabriel ever wondered if that was paranormal or was there someone in the basement. They did call the cops, and the cops searched the area, but they confirmed that there was no one down in the basement. He still wonders today if what he just saw was completely paranormal, or was that Gabriel's mind going all over the place.